And welcome to Thrift Shop Biography. This is the one about Agatha Christie. Thank you for listening. Hello, Cleo.
Hello, Richard.
How are you?
I am excellent, thank you.
Did you enjoy the book this week?
I loved it, and you know I would, because I sort of made us read it. And I know that you're always up for reading anything, but this one was ridiculously long again.
Oh,
my God. 550 pages or something, which is like 2 books or so.
Yeah, so it's Agatha Christie, and it's just called My Autobiography, isn't it?
Yeah. Did you enjoy it?
I did, yeah. It's beautifully written. I mean, I could have done without some of the insane amount of detail she went into, but I did. I loved it a lot. What about you?
I also particularly loved it because I'm a big fan of Poirot, Miss Marple. I loved Agatha Christie when I was a kid, and I used to live in Torquay, which is where she grew up. So I've got all these things going for it. Why I should really want to read this book and extra love it, and I did.
The one thing I know about you is that when most people were having crushes on pop stars, you were mad for Poirot.
I was the old totally asexual Belgian detective.
Didn't you paint like a massive mural on your wall when you were 13
mural.
or something?
I did. Yes.
Wow.
So that I could make friends with it.
You were a proper Poirot fangirl.
Yeah. Yeah, that really was. Yeah, I still am, actually. I still am.
Of course you are. You stalk David Suchet
Yeah,
every time.
yeah, I love him.
How many times have you met him now?
A few times. Yeah, but there's lots of times he doesn't know about.
Because you just stalk him.
Stalking. Anyway. Okay, let me ask you this question. Did you think you knew Agatha Christie and then were surprised to find she was someone else you didn't realise?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really know too much about her other than she is a legendary writer who I believe is the best-selling author of all time. So that's kind of all I know about her. And do you know what? I honestly don't think I've read a single Agatha Christie book, and I don't think I've ever watched a Poirot or a Miss Marple. Oh,
Good
actually, no,
grief.
hang on. I tell you what I have done. I've watched Death on the Nile and The Orient Express, because what I did,
yeah.
I watched like this recent one that had terrible CGI and stuff, so I went back.
Oh, you didn't watch the Kenneth Branagh.
Yeah.
No, it's not proper.
But I went back and I watched the one with Bette Davis and
Good.
Was it David Niven?
Yeah, and that's Peter Ustinov.
Peter Ustinov, sorry, yeah. Oh my God, that is so good.
That is really good, but none are as good as David Suchet. Because he completely captured what she wrote in the books.
Does he have a head shaped exactly like an egg?
Yes, he does. So, but she's not who you think she is she? Okay, my biggest revelation is she's a surfer.
Yeah.
Agatha Christie is a surfer.
I did not imagine Agatha Christie on a surfboard.
No.
And she loved it.
Yeah, I think she's a very, very cool woman. I mean, already she's an author in times where women weren't anything. But she's such an adventurous, brave, exciting woman, whilst being really shy at the same time. And she's got such a brilliant mind for plots and stories and the mathematics of it all. And characterizations and stuff. She's cool.
She's very cool. In fact, let's just get straight into her so we can talk about her as we go through her story.
All right, good.
Agatha Mary Clarissa Miller. She was named Mary after her grandmother, Clarissa after her mother, and Agatha as an afterthought, which was just suggested on the way to the church on the day of her christening by her mum's friend who said it was a nice name.
Random.
I love that she's just named at the last minute on the way to the church.
Yeah. Oh, go on then, bung that in.
And it became one of the most famous names in literature. I love that.
Yeah, it's really cool. Born in 1890 in Torquay.
Torquay in Devon, England.
Devon, coastal town, southwest, which is known as the English Riviera. There's actually palm trees. Got a freakishly nice climate.
She grew up in a villa, right?
It's like a small mansion, isn't it, really? Ashfield.
Yeah, which they kind of had all the way until her mum died, right?
Yeah. And she had a happy childhood and loving parents.
Very happy.
And a nice nanny. I mean, it's a class thing in Britain, obviously, but we would say she had a very posh upbringing, very privileged. I'd definitely say privileged.
Oh, 100% absolutely. But she doesn't appear to feel that privilege. And I think that can only be because the other people in their social class probably have more money.
That's definitely it.
Like she says, we weren't that rich. We only had 3 servants. Most people had 5. And it's just
Yes,
like, no,
I know.
if you had 3 servants, you were rich.
I know. That's exactly it. Their circles were really upper class.
Yeah.
And for their circles, they didn't have as much as anyone else. So, yeah, she felt, relatively speaking, poor.
Yes.
But to us, they were rich.
Yeah.
Her dad...
Yeah.
Well, her dad didn't work.
Her dad didn't work. He was what they call a gentleman of substance, which I assume just meant he had a big inheritance, right?
Yes, well, yeah, exactly. His dad had made a fortune in America, so he didn't have to work. But most of these biographies we read, even if they're rock stars or whatever, they only give their children a small allowance to try and make them go off in the world and become someone themselves. Whereas this bloke, he got dressed and went to his club every morning. He came back in a cab for lunch. Right, and a cab, you didn't have cars then, so that's a horse-drawn carriage. He came back for lunch, then went back to the club to play whist in the afternoon. Then he came back in the horse-drawn carriage to dress for dinner and have dinner in his own home.
God, what a life.
And everyone loved him. He was very agreeable. He was very generous. I mean, that's just a total life of leisure.
Yeah.
It's a whole different world, isn't it, that? Even Prince Harry had to work hard. Much harder than that.
Well, he has to be seen to be working. Whereas I guess if you're just some man in Torquay, you could just, have a life of leisure.
Yeah, real leisure.
But I think that money he inherited, I think that by the time he gave it to his son, it all went.
It was being dribbled away. But
They burnt through it. Agatha says that her dad was incredible. She actually says he was fantastically generous. That's why he had so many friends.
Yeah, that's right. But he was definitely stiffed and diddled because later on, when their money was running out, it was the investors in America that had all diddled them.
Right, yeah.
They'd misspent it. It was disappeared, and there wasn't the internet. You couldn't find out what had happened.
Yeah.
It was all abroad and it was all gone. Because one of the investors felt so guilty that he paid her mother some money for the rest of her life out of his own pocket because he knew what he'd done. So, yeah, they were stiffed and diddled. The classic.
So she said that her dad was really good fun, a great sense of humour, just a natural happiness, of course, as somebody would who never had to do a day's work in their life.
Yeah.
But she says that her mum was entirely different.
Yeah.
She says she was more forceful.
Melancholy.
Yeah, definitely. And she said that she was miserably diffident about herself.
Yeah.
And I imagine that she probably is if her husband's going off to the club every day.
Yeah, that's true.
So Agatha Christie had an older brother and sister who were older by some years.
Yes.
And they were already kind of off at boarding school before little Agatha was born. So she was kind of in some respects an only child.
Yeah.
Well, she certainly had the life of one.
Yeah, she did.
So she had a nanny to what's her mum doing all day?
I know.
If she's not working and she's got one child at home, but she has to employ somebody to look after that child.
I know there's this cook. She actually cooks 5-course dinners for about 7 or 8 people every single night. And there's a menu, there's choices for each course.
Yeah.
And she does it on her own. She was with them for 40 years. That's incredible.
Yeah, it's amazing that Agatha's family can do that when they don't have much money, so she says.
Yeah, I know.
They weren't rich.
No, they weren't rich. Oh, they actually had to walk everywhere. Actually, right, this whole scene of Torquay is totally fascinating, particularly to me, because I grew up there for a certain part of my life, and we had a hotel. And it was a seaside resort for basically working class British people. Mm-hmm. They drink loads, they get sunburned, they come back to the hotel, have an evening meal, sit at the bar. It's a working class people's holiday resort. This Torquay is another world. It's the Victorian times. There's all these posh families. These beaches she's describing as segregated, ladies-only beaches where they roll those sheds into the water and they come out in all their frilly dresses. That's a beach I used to go to. And I used to swim out to the raft and swim back and have an ice cream. You know what I mean? It's like my layers of time are right on top of her exact same places, but it's another whole world. There's just cheap people in bikinis eating ice creams and having a fag and drinking a beer, And it's like all mixed together, and topless people. You're just like, this is completely amazing, isn't it, to read this time that happened in this resort. And it said then that it was a very fashionable place to spend winter. in Torquay, it was a winter resort. Whereas now it's a summer resort. Then it was considered too hot in the summer, which even she said was ridiculous because she doesn't ever remember it being hot. And then they'd all go in the winter, and it was all concerts and parties were all happening in the winter. It's just absolutely bizarre to me to read this. It's just nuts.
The one thing about this book, it is overlong and she goes into tremendous detail about everything. But as a historical account of a certain place at a certain time.
At a certain class.
Yeah, and when she talks about the wars and stuff as well, I mean, it's fascinating.
Yeah, you can just get lost in the world of it. Yeah, it's really great.
But at the same time, I did not need to hear lots of detail about little Agatha Christie's imaginary friends.
Oh my God. Yeah, so she's, as a kid, she's obviously on her own a lot. She invents these whole worlds. She invents school because she doesn't get sent to school. But she actually tells us
oh my God,
who all these people are and what happened to them.
I know.
They were very real to her, but we don't need to know.
We don't need to know. And I mean, it's kind of interesting in the way that she's a writer, so she invents characters and stuff. But I did not need to know what happened to all of these people who actually didn't exist.
No.
It's like, I tell you what it's like. You know, my pet hate is when people tell you about their dreams.
I'm that person.
I just kind of think that it didn't actually happen. I don't care. I don't need to listen about your dreams.
It happened to them. It's as real to her as any other part of anyone's real childhood is to them.
Oh my God.
Those were her friends.
So she had proper imaginary friends and she tells us about them in great detail in this book.
She does. But you know what? If you're a real Agatha Christie nut, like almost academic nut, you'd actually want to know what those stories were because you'd trace the development of her storytelling and her style and her imagination because it would be important to you. You know, who is this woman? What was she thinking? And you want to know. At least she wrote it down. You know, we could have skipped over it. We didn't.
Did you have imaginary friends?
I had one. I had one imaginary friend.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Do you remember their name?
No, I don't actually. But I know where I used to meet them on the way home from school at a certain place. About 2/3 of the way home.
You used to meet an imaginary friend?
Yeah, and then walk the rest of the way with him. I don't know why they didn't meet me earlier, but I walked 2/3 of the way without them. And then met up.
Well, I'm really confused. You actually would go and meet your imaginary friend. It wasn't just in your head.
It was on the way home. It's like, oh, this is where I meet my imaginary friend who joins me for the rest of the journey.
Oh, my God.
You don't need to know this. This is the whole point.
Wow.
Anyway, she says she used to potter around, like, talking out loud because she was talking out all these stories and characters. She was always muttering. And then years later, she says... she still does it, basically. When she's trying to think out one of her books, she does it by actually sort of acting them out in her head. And she said, I'm often going along the street, I'll completely forget to go to the bank, I'll just walk right past it, because I'm muttering away at these storylines. She makes it all work, and then she can go home and just write it. That's why it's interesting, because that's the same person she was when she was a kid. And she just grew into an adult version and made a mint and entertained us all from just being this imaginative person. It's great.
Yeah, no, it is. She actually has this paragraph about how we are the person we are basically born, and like who we are at 3 or 4, our personality and stuff. Because that's what I actually believe. I think the child becomes the man or the child becomes a woman.
I do too.
And this is a real example of that.
Totally, yeah.
How this nut... this nut with extensive imaginary universes that she exists in.
Yes.
Actually, as she grew up, she still had that, but she wrote them down as she became the world's most celebrated author. So, yeah, interesting.
That's the nature part. The nurture part is this amazing world that she grew up around, all these characters, the sort of life she was thrown into, like going to be educated in Paris or going to the opera, going to meeting artists, and then eventually... the archaeology, everything, and all of these characters in a huge world that she was thrown into goes into her books. So that bit's the nurture, but the nature was there anyway.
But the interesting thing about the nurture thing at the beginning is that her mum didn't let her read. She didn't want her to read until she was 8 years old because she thought it kind of dulled the brain and the eyes.
Yes. But she did anyway. She had to teach herself.
Yeah.
So she just got hold of books and read them until they made sense to her. And then she just read and read and read.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing how some of the best people are voracious readers.
Yes, well, we're voracious readers now.
Yeah, we are now. I keep thinking that, we're going to be amazing brains soon.
No, we just learn unnecessary facts about famous people.
Yeah.
I'll win the Nobel Prize for celebrity gossip. How about that?
Yeah. Okay, this is my favourite thing in here that gave me an insight into her dark side, is that she said that when she was really young, like, she's perpetually 5 in this book as well. She's always about 5.
Oh, my God, she's 5 for like the first 200 pages. I was like, when are you going to grow up? Get on with it.
Yeah, but she used to have these dreams, and they were really, really scary, and they were always the same, that there was this fear of this character called the gunman, and she'd be in any sort of dream, looking around, everything's fine, and then she'd suddenly go, there's the gunman over there, and this fear would set in. And then, this is the good bit, right? She said then it would morph into, you could be sitting around the dinner table and look around you. I could be talking to my sister and suddenly I'd realise, I'd see through her eyes and realise that inside her was the gunman. So they could be anyone. That's epic. That's essentially the core of horror and fear. And she gets that into her books. It could be anyone.
Well, that's how she writes these whodunits, isn't it?
Yes. But those were actual dreams when she was really young, the fear. But then she obviously kind of enjoyed the fear. Because then the rest of her life, it's all she's thinking of. She's collecting ideas about murder and crime and the dark side and evil and what that means. What a fascinating human. What a great mind. Here's another amazing thing. In those times, because women didn't really, they didn't have jobs or careers, in your mind, you didn't know what your future would be because you have no control over it. So your future was, who will you marry? And what sort of person will they be? And what job did they do? Because your whole life would be shaped by what the man did that you would marry. And that's amazing but she loved that. They all loved it. They talked about it.
Well, yeah, society really was just training women to be wives.
Yeah.
And then also from her point of view, look, her mum is a wife, but her dad goes out to the club every single day and her mum's miserable. But she still had this romantic idea of being a wife. Gosh, they really sold it to them, didn't they? I guess they had to. Society had to train these young girls to be wives because society depended on it.
Yeah, that's just how it was.
Wow. 100 years ago.
Yeah, it's not long. It's not long at all.
No, it really isn't.
She was not complaining at all. She just fell into a career. I mean, she never even... It's not like she set out. It's not like she had ambition. She used to think, I wonder if I could be a concert pianist because I'm learning the piano. I quite like singing. Maybe I could do that. And she said for the rest of her days, if she ever filled out a form, she always put wife and mother. She never, ever put author because she just saw it as a hobby.
Yeah, it took a long, long time for her to accept the fact that she had a prolific career as a writer because it was so ingrained in her that she was a wife.
Yeah. It's a hobby. A woman sits down and writes a little book and it might get published. It's a bit of pocket money,
Yeah.
I think she doesn't say, but in her lifetime she must have made a lot of money. Because all this stuff's getting serialised, in America and everything. It does keep going up and then she stops saying how much she's getting. But
yeah, she's really coy about how much money she makes, but also about her age. Once her daughter's born, throughout the first part of the book, I was 5, I was 6,
always 5.
I was 11. But then as she gets married and has a child, she stops saying how old she is because I had to keep thinking, how old is she at this point? I had to keep working it out.
Anyway, when she was 11... her dad died and she absolutely loved him and that was huge.
Yeah.
That was the worst thing, obviously, ever. And her mum was absolutely bereft. She does continuously say how happy, it's always happy times. I think she's sort of glancing over the massive anxiety caused by her dad's death. Because she does say that she constantly expected her mother to die and she couldn't sleep.
Oh.
And she'd have to keep going to her mum's room and looking through the keyhole. And if she couldn't hear breathing, she'd wait for hours sometimes until she could hear a snore or something. Because she just thought she was going to die.
Yeah, I really hated reading that. That was like her mum had such anxiety. She really passed it on to 11-year-old Agatha. And in fact, Agatha said that her childhood stopped when her dad died because her siblings are older. So all of a sudden, it's just her mum and her in this big house in this prolonged period of grief. Also, the way that society is set up to be a wife, what do you do when he's gone?
Yeah, what do you do?
And what's surprising about it is that the older sister, Madge, got married like a year later, and Agatha said it was a really subdued ceremony because they were still in mourning for her dad. The mourning period was like a year at least.
I mean, it is anyway, naturally.
Oh, naturally, yeah, but this seemed a bit extreme.
Actually having to get married in black and everything, yeah.
Yeah, and do you know what? I think this is the different thing about not being upper class and having to work for a living. Maybe normality hits in quicker if you've got to get up and go to work, maybe.
Yeah, that's true.
But, when you just at home with money doing crochet and you've got servants, perhaps mourning just lasts for longer because it just naturally can. You're not forced to move on with your life.
Maybe. I was going to say there's another book in just what her sister and her brother got up to, but no, she actually does write it in this book. Yes. And it is interesting. But her brother Monty, I mean, we can't get into it, but he's another character out of a book, isn't he?
Yeah.
One of those real upper-class tearaway blokes who's just very entitled, it seems. It's that sort of behaviour, really entitled, royal-like behaviour.
Mm-hmm.
And her sister was really into Sherlock Holmes and was a big influence on Agatha Christie and read to her first Sherlock Holmes. And she'd started writing some stories and actually had a couple of things published and a couple of plays put on.
Yeah, she had stories published in Vanity Fair, which must have been a big deal, actually.
Yes. So it was her who kind of started it.
She does say, Agatha Christie says of her sister, I wonder if she would have gone on to be a writer if she hadn't got married.
Yeah, maybe.
So there you go. There's the female thing again.
But then Agatha Christie got married and she became a writer. She had one kid too.
Yeah.
It was her sister who after a while said, I bet you can't write a detective story. No, I actually bet you can't. And that's what made her do it, which is brilliant. Because the first one she wrote was The Mysterious Affair of Styles, which is the actual first Poirot book. And it's where she invented Poirot, and it's really good. It's her first book.
Well, I believe that The Mysterious Affair at Styles is generally perceived as her best novel. So it's amazing to think it was her first one.
It is amazing. Yeah, she invented Poirot. She just said there was a lot of Belgian refugees in Tours, part of Torquay, and it would be fun to make him a foreign person. By then, she'd been educated in Paris, spoke French. No wonder he speaks so much French, I was thinking.
Yeah, right.
She does. She's fluent. Does. And then she's got every single crazy aristocratic person she's ever met and all these mad characters that she can just drop in. She makes them up, but they're all based on people she knows, obviously. And then later on, she invents Miss Marple because that character had got cut out of something else when they made it into a play. That was roughly based on her granny in Ealing. And it was just that all those people who just watch everything and she said they're always down on everything. Like, oh, they'll get up to no good. Oh, that'll come to nothing. It's that sort of...
I love that she says her one regret was making Poirot and Miss Marple so old when she started writing them. She said if she started again, she'd make a detective a schoolboy so it could grow old with her.
Yes. 40 years later, she's still writing them.
So you would know, but in Poirot and Miss Marple, so presumably they don't actually age. Every time a new story comes out, are they more or less the same age?
The stories, yeah. But I mean, the more recent adaptations... Miss Marple's all set in the 1950s and Poirot's always set in the 1930s because they just sort of stamped Art Deco onto Poirot, so they just don't change it. Nobody cares.
Yeah.
It's just a story, isn't it?
Yeah, it looks like James Bond. He doesn't really get older.
No.
You don't need to age them.
Oh, yeah, exactly. So meanwhile, she had this privileged education, Paris.
She went to Florence when she was 16.
Yeah,
for somebody who isn't rich, she is going to travel a lot as a kid.
I know, seriously, yeah, travelling's such a part of it and being thrown into Paris.
Yeah.
And it actually was because when they was losing their money, they used to rent out their house in Torquay for a decent amount of money in the winter and then go and live in France somewhere for the winter or Cairo for 3 months. And it's another thing as well, it's that old empire time of Britain where you could go anywhere in the world and there was a British colony and British life. Because, you think Cairo and there you go, oh, it's all these British upper class people just living in Cairo. And there's a social scene. You wouldn't even have to meet an Egyptian person unless they're a waiter or a butler.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Even when she ends up going to Baghdad and all those Iraq, she finds this whole upper-class social scene. She says, I came here to have adventures and I'm just going to tennis clubs with all the British expats.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I didn't even know there was that world in Iraq, ever. It's a total empire where we're sticking our oar in every single place in the world and acting like we own it.
Everywhere.
But she actually saw that world. She actually travelled all over it and then tells us about it.
Yeah, extensively. I was amazed because she does say like it was the most exciting time of her life. So I know that she truly appreciated it. She wasn't just some snob going around. And like you say, she was frustrated that a lot of the time she went, she was kind of coerced into going to the rich people's clubs and stuff, where she is by heart. We know that she is more of an adventurer. She prefers that side of it. So, you know, she's one of the better people going over there, I would say. And she used it for her work and stuff.
Yes.
So like you say, she had a privileged education. She's very well traveled. And she was writing like a couple of short stories that got taken into magazines and poetry, right? She won a poetry competition. And then the family had this friend called Eden Philpotts, who I'd never heard of, but apparently he's a celebrated writer. Do you know him?
No.
Okay, and it was him. He's a personal friend of the family. So it is that thing. There's somebody in her immediate circle has success as a writer. So it actually is a possible avenue for you to go down as a young person. And he actually introduced her to his literary agent, Hughes Massey. So she sent him a manuscript of a story she'd written, and he sent it back to her a few months later saying, look, it's okay, but there's nothing I can do with it. My advice to you is to go and write another book. But anyway, so she gets herself a literary agent. So she meets this guy called Reggie, right? And they become engaged.
Yeah, friend of the family. It sounds like they'd have had a lovely life together, but he decides to make her wait for 2 years in case she finds someone better off.
Yeah, she did.
She finds someone worse off and marries him instead because she couldn't wait.
Yeah, Archie.
She was a romantic. Archie Christie, yeah. And he was in the Flying Corps.
It does sound like, you know, when she was hobnobbing around and stuff, she did kind of seem to date quite a few men.
Yes.
In order to find the right one. But then if people are being trained for wives and the excitement is, oh, I wonder who I'm going to marry.
Yeah.
Perhaps you would actually road test quite a few men before you found the one.
That's definitely what you would do because they needed to actually get to know each other. That 3 months in Cairo, she went to 5 dances a week and you had dance cards and it was structured and you actually booked people in. I thought it's like a reality TV show, you know, where you're actually just trying this and that. Yeah, see who wins the show. It's based on old-fashioned dating games.
Like The Bachelor.
Yeah. It's for real, yeah. So she had quite a few proposals.
Yeah, it's a shame because when she did have Reggie and he made her wait, he did sound a better partner than Archie, not
Didn't
least
he?
because Archie didn't have any money.
Yeah.
And actually Agatha's mum said to her, how can you get married? You're not in a financial position to get married.
No, because he was just in the Flying Corps.
Yeah. And then the war, we should say the First World War, starts to happen. And she actually becomes a nurse, doesn't she?
Yeah. She does. By the way, Archie was among the first pilots in Britain ever. She says he was number 105 or 106.
Wow.
Of all pilots ever. It's amazing, isn't it?
That is amazing. You just forget that at one point planes didn't exist.
Yeah, I know.
And this is that
and
time.
Another time she was adventurous. Yeah, because she actually went on a plane ride.
Yes, she did.
They went to some exhibition of flying and it was £5 to go up in a plane for 5 minutes. And she desperately wanted to. Now, it wasn't safe then. Lots and lots of people died in small plane crashes all the time. But she went up for 5 minutes and had a little flight. She is, you know, of course she married a pilot. She's an adventurous person.
She's an adrenaline junkie.
Yeah. That was 1911 when she did that. A swimmer, a flyer, a surfer.
A crime writer.
Yeah, a crime writer, yes.
So the wars are going on, First World War. She's a nurse, he's a pilot. People are telling them they shouldn't get married, but then one day he comes back on leave at Christmas and he says, we got to get married at once. And so they arrange it very quickly. And on Christmas Eve, they get married and Mum is terribly upset. But they have been together for a while at this point. They've been together for 2 years.
But they'd been apart for 3 months. The First World War had started. You know, Agatha Christie's looking after, you know, casualties of trench warfare. Hideous. And he's been, you know, seeing all the death from the air. You know, it's one of those, it's wartime, you just got to get married because you actually expect you might die.
Yeah.
Particularly the men. Death is in the air.
Death is in the air. That sounds like an Agatha Christie title.
Hey! It does actually. But the hospital Agatha Christie was working at was temporarily set up at Torquay Town Hall. where I used to go to roller skating discos. So those casualties from the trenches were being looked after by Agatha Christie, where I used to skate to disco in the 80s. That's weird.
That's what they were fighting for in the war.
Yeah.
They fought for your freedom to roller skate to Earth, Wind and Fire.
It's just weird. Oh, but then she actually left that hospital and went into the dispensary. And that's really key to her books because so many of her crimes are to do with poisons and medicines that are available that you can misuse to murder people. So the dispensary time is really key. And at that point, she was saying that you actually mix them by hand. You got a bit of this, a little bit of that, a little drop of that to mix up the certain medicines, and different doctors would have different recipes and cocktails. When she went back to work at this dispensary again in the Second World War, she said by then most of the medicines were pre-made. So you didn't have to do that much. You just handed them out. And that's how much medicine's changed.
Oh, I think that she really became knowledgeable in the field of pharmacy and poisonings and stuff. And
oh, yeah, really, yeah. And it's absolutely key. And in both wars, when she was working in these pharmacies, she had tons of time to write between people coming in for prescriptions. And she wrote tons of her books, actually next to the poisons.
You know, here's one thing that I do know, just how knowledgeable and respected she is in that field. I don't know the details, but there was a famous case where somebody had been poisoned and the detectives cracked it whilst reading an Agatha Christie novel because the symptoms of the character in the book were the same as the symptoms which happened in real life. And it was through I think the case had gone cold or something. And a couple of years later, the detective was reading an Agatha Christie book and thought, oh my God, that's exactly what happened to this guy. And they solved the case because of her book.
Amazing. That's brilliant. Of course, meanwhile, she was collecting bits out of the news of real life and then putting them into her stories.
So when she wrote her first Poirot novel, she sent it off to a publisher. She was rejected like 6 times in 2 years.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like an immediate success. She then was also rejected by Methuen. And This Is a Mysterious Affair at Styles. And then she sent it off to Bodley Head, John Lane publishers. And they literally had it for in fact, they had it for so long that she'd forgotten that she sent it in. Because obviously she was still being a pharmacist working in the dispensary during the war. And then one day she just got a call from the publishers saying, oh, we like your book. We'd like to publish it. But only a short run, I think, of 2,000 books to begin with.
Well, they said that they paid her £25 and they said you'll only get royalties when they sell over 2,000 copies, and they only sold about just over 2,000. So.
Gosh, I wonder how much they're worth now if you could get an original copy of the mysterious... I'm going to look on eBay.
Yeah, I can't
Hey,
imagine.
well, while we're thrifting, let's look out for old Agatha Christie books.
Yeah.
First World War is over, book gets picked up for publication, and she has a baby.
She has a baby, Rosalind, a girl, and they are living in London now. And Archie's got a job in the city, which he really likes. So he's bringing in all right income. And after not that long, he gets offered a round-the-world trip to promote the Empire exhibition and to go round to all the dignitaries of the world to get them interested. And is she going to come with them is the question. But they dump the kid off with her mum and sister, and off they go for literally, it's nuts, isn't it? This kid's about 1 or 2, and they go off for 10 months around the world.
But do you know what her mother said to her? She said a wife ought to be with her husband, and if she isn't, then he feels he has a right to forget her.
Yeah, or sort of wander.
So, of course, you would never let your husband go on a world trip on his own anyway, because you would just be scared of losing him. So you'd rather abandon your 1-year-old child for
Yeah, but I tell you what, she was right, because the one time she takes her eye off the ball, off he goes.
Yeah.
But also, she couldn't believe her luck. She gets to go round the world. She couldn't believe it.
It's amazing.
So excited. It is amazing. And it's very around the world in 80 days. In that you take a train, a boat, because you can't fly anywhere. You know, you've got this schedule, and if the schedule goes off and the boat doesn't make it to that port, you've got to get the train to that port to connect with that to that. It's just brilliant. It's that Victorian travel where it's all timetable. It's very exciting. They go to Cape Town, all around South Africa. They go to Australia, all around Australia. And they're always meeting the poshest people, the dignitaries, having amazing dinners, being really looked after, staying in great hotels. They go to New Zealand. And then they get a month's holiday in Honolulu in Hawaii, where they surf every single day. She said it didn't even cross my mind to go wandering around looking at the rest of Hawaii because I was addicted to surfing.
Yeah.
She said it's the most addictive physical joy I've ever had, just when you catch that wave.
Well, you know what? Bearing in mind she hadn't seen her 1-year-old child for 9 months, they were actually due to go home and they were enjoying surfing so much they extended their stay to surf rather than go home and see her child.
Yeah.
So she was having a good time.
Yeah. Yeah, and I tell you what else, she went in the sea and she was like, I can't deal with all these frills. So she went and bought this short bathing suit. She was that forward. She's one of the first women to ever... There's pictures in the book, just standing by their surfboards with her legs out in the 1920, you know. She really is a feisty woman.
Yeah.
There's a good word for it. Not like a forerunner, a front runner. A trendsetter.
She calls her mum a go-ahead because she sent her older sister to a boarding school, which was practically unheard of.
Yeah.
So that was very forward-thinking. So she's a bit like her mother then. Like 20 years later, she can wear a swimsuit.
And she'll go off on her own as well. She'll go, oh, the money's run out, so I'll go on to New York. You stay here in Canada. Off she goes. Like later, she's travelling to Baghdad on her own. And she said then no women ever travelled on their own. But she did.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Very independent.
She sure is.
Yeah.
So then back on track with her literary career. So she's had a book out, it's sold reasonably, and then the Evening News offer her £500 for the serial rights for her next mystery, The Mystery of the Mill House. £500 in like 1920 must have been a lot of money, right?
Yeah, that's the one that turned into The Man in the Brown Suit.
Okay.
She's a much cooler title.
Mm-hmm.
She'd already written as well The Secret Adversary and Murder on the Links as books. So that was the fourth one. It's just growing and growing.
And she's definitely getting money because she actually talks about buying her first car.
Yeah.
Which she's incredibly excited about. And she says the most exciting times in her life was when she bought her first car and she met the Queen at Buckingham Palace.
Yeah, 40 years later she had dinner with the Queen.
Yeah.
That's how good a car was.
Yeah, that's how good a car was back then. It's equal to meeting the Queen. Wow.
But she just says, you cannot imagine the freedom, if you've never had a car before, of getting in a car and being able to take yourself places. And I can actually, because I've only just bought a car after all these years. And it is amazing.
Hey, she said even then the police would be hiding behind hedges with speed traps. Wow.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I don't imagine that at the advent of cars, the police would be catching you with a speed trap.
Yeah, it's mad. Anyway, this is where she came undone because her mother died. So she went to Ashfield, the big house in Torquay, to sort it all out. And so while she was firstly sorting all the house out and secondly grieving all at the same time.
Yeah.
And I think she worked for like 10 or 11 hours of really physical sorting every day and got ill with it. And she actually forgot her name at some point when she was trying to sign her cheque. Basically, she had a nervous breakdown. And by the time Archie came to visit, I think it was probably a few months she was there, he'd fallen in love with his mate's secretary, who was younger, and he said, I'm in love, I want a divorce. He just said it straight out. At least he did it, just said it. And that's, I mean, in those times, it's the worst.
Yeah, of course. I mean, you say at least he did it, but how long was he carrying on with her before? Because he wasn't coming to see Agatha.
Oh, the whole time his wife's grieving.
Yeah, and she was like, come and see me and the child at the weekend, and he'd always make up an excuse not to come. And obviously it's because he was having an affair.
Yeah, she's so nice to him. She never is mean about him. She says, oh, he's always hated any sort of illness. So I should have known he wouldn't like this.
Yeah, right.
Seriously.
Do you know what she misses out of this book?
What?
Which I find extraordinary. Is like one of the most significant parts of her life is when she went missing.
Yes, she does.
For 11 days she went missing, and it was a front page news story every single day. They found her car at the top of a quarry, and people thought that she'd either fell or jumped into the water, and that was the end of her. But it turns out she was in a hotel booked in under the name of the woman that her husband was having an affair with.
Bloody hell.
But she has no recollection of it. So that may be why it's not in this book, but 2 doctors independently assessed her and said she has no memory of it. So they think she went into a fugue state.
Yeah, she had a proper nervous breakdown.
Yeah.
The only thing she mentions is not being able to remember her name. But then after that as well, she says that she was absolutely plagued by the press, and that's when her hatred and fear of the press came about. Because she was a famous crime writer, but a really shy and private woman.
Yeah.
That was her having a nervous breakdown, and she couldn't have possibly imagined it would have made front page news. But it was like a crime in itself, because the mystery of the missing crime writer. And then after that, just to escape the British press, she went abroad for a while.
Well, you know why as well? Because the public almost turned on her because they just assumed it was a massive publicity stunt for her new book. They didn't actually realise that she was having a proper nervous breakdown. So actually everything went very wrong for her at this moment in time.
Yeah. And I knew she'd remarried. But I didn't know that the bloke had had an affair and that she would have happily stayed married to him her whole life. I didn't know that until reading this book.
Well, that's what you did then, isn't it?
And he'd said he didn't want any more kids either, which is really sad because he went off and got married to this younger woman and had more kids. And never really saw his daughter again, which is tragic because she loved her dad. So that's terrible. I think she definitely is one of those kids who suffered through all of this story.
Well, she grew up to be a swimwear model, didn't she? Which brought great shame on her mother, Agatha.
Oh, yeah.
That's her rebellion, isn't it?
Yes.
So is she off on the Orient Express at this point? She's disappearing. She's having a horrible time and off she goes, right?
Yeah, on the Orient Express to Baghdad on a massive adventure to actually find out who she is on her own, because she's never really known. And yeah, she absolutely is enraptured by this world of archaeology. She has an amazing time generally, as we've mentioned, all this part of the world. She loves it. But ultimately, she's totally smitten by these archaeological digs. So she goes back there, I think, the year later, when her friend that she's staying with has a young assistant called Max Mallowan. He is, I think, 14 years younger than her. He's only been out of university about 5 years working for this archaeological dig. So I think he's about 25 and she's nearly 40. It's that sort of thing. She says that's probably why they got on so well, because it didn't even occur to her at all there could be any romance. So she's completely free to talk to him and for them to become friends. And he gets assigned to escort her to a mosque. He's completely brilliant at archaeology. He's really educated. He's interesting, but he's also quiet. And although he's young, he doesn't like parties. He's a really academic-minded young man. And they just have a really great time. Like, they break down in the desert, and so they decide to go for a swim in the lake, and she just goes in her underwear, you know. And then she has a sleep in the sand whilst they're fixing the car, just lies down, has a sleep. And he's like, this woman could be my wife. You know, he could imagine a future with this woman because she's adventurous. And that's basically what happens. And they stay together to the end of both of their lives. They really have a great marriage, and they just travel together. They go loads of archaeological digs. There's pictures of them where they live in a house in Baghdad near a river, and she can write her books.
Yeah.
And she's really involved in the archaeology, isn't she?
Yeah, she really is. I didn't realise that a lot of her later work is immersed in this world.
Yeah. What's the really famous one that takes place? It's not Murder on the Orient Express, but it's another one as famous.
Death on the Nile.
Death on the Nile! That's all that sort of thing, though, with archaeology and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there's quite a few of them set out that sort of place.
But, I mean, what a nice life that they had anyway.
Yeah. She does continuously say these were happy years, throughout her whole life. The darkest part is the divorce part. And
the death of her parents, yeah, and and I think the divorce part, I think it did take her a long time to get over it. But then she ended up marrying this very educated, affable younger man, and, you know, for the next 30, 40 years, having a great time.
Had an amazing life. And then she had this thing on the side where she just bought and sold houses. Who knew? She said in the beginning of the Second World War, she had 8 houses in London. She loved to buy them, do them up, and then she'd sell them at a good profit.
And I love that when her and Max come back to London, she says, we stayed in a few of my houses to decide which one we wanted to live in.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but keep telling us you're not rich, Agatha.
I know.
So in the Second World War, she actually goes back to be a dispenser again, doesn't she?
Yes.
So she's very much wants to get involved with the war. Even as a rich person, she does think about what can I do to be a part of the war.
Yes, she does.
Again, because she's adventurous. She does stuff.
Yeah.
She doesn't sit around.
No, yeah, she definitely is.
Yeah.
And they bought this house, Greenway. Only $6,000 is insane, right? This is before the Second World War. It's in Dartmouth, and I've been there. You can go there. It's open to the public. Anybody interested in Agatha Christie, I couldn't recommend it more, because her daughter lived in it until she died. And when she died, her grandson Matthew cleared it out, and that's when he found these tapes that she'd made that was the rest of the autobiography that had never been found. So that's when this got published. And they actually play these tapes in the house so you can hear her talking. And they've kept it exactly intact from when she lived there. So when they talk about in the Second World War that one of the soldiers painted a mural of their whole journey as American naval people, and that's still there. She left it there, this mural in there.
Oh, wow.
And you go in her library and it's like her brain. It's like you can see her brain, because you've got criminology books, poison books. Everything that you'd research if you were going to be Agatha Christie is all around you in books. It's absolutely amazing. Archaeology, obviously,
Where is
all
it?
of that stuff. It's in Dartmouth, and you could actually get a steam train there. It's absolutely brilliant. You go to Painted, get a steam train, and it drops you down the lane, and you walk along, and you're at this absolutely stunning house, and it's on a peninsula, and it's there's water around it. And they filmed one of the last Poirots there.
Okay.
Yeah. Can't recommend that more. It's brilliant going there. And then she wrote plays, right? This has to be mentioned because loads of people were adapting her books to make into plays. And every time she saw them, it broke her heart because they didn't do it how she wanted it done. So she thought, right, from now on, I'm going to adapt my own books into plays. And I'm also going to just write plays. And of course, massively successful. That are plays that are still being put on today, like Black Coffee, Alibi, and also The Mousetrap.
Yeah.
I mean, The Mousetrap.
I love that in this book she's amazed because she goes, it's just coming to the end of its 13th year. And it's just like, wow, she died without knowing that it's still going on now.
Yes. It's on in London right now, currently as we speak. It's been on for 70 years. It started in 1952, but COVID stopped it for 2 years. But that doesn't count. That's no one's fault.
Doesn't count.
No, it's not counted because all theatres stopped. So as long as theatres have been open, it's consecutively run for 70 years. I went in its 36th year.
The 36th year? That makes you sound really old.
Yeah, I know. And Witness for the Prosecution is on in London continuously as well, which was amazing to a film with Marlene Dietrich.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, the fact they're still on to this day.
At County, and that's run for a few years now, hasn't it?
Yeah, years, yeah. Not as long as The Mousetrap, obviously.
Yeah.
She says when she went to the party, I think it was the 10th anniversary of The Mousetrap, that she goes to the door and they said, oh, you're not on the list. And she went, okay. And just was wandering around. She went, part of me wants to go, I am Agatha Christie. This party's for me. And then she went, I can't say that. They'll think, who does she think she is? And then she said the problem is that part of me still thinks that I'm not a real author. I'm just a woman. You know, why should I think I'm someone special? Modest to the end. Amazing.
Yeah, it is amazing. And it's just that thing when you're a writer, like people actually don't know what you look like. They know your name, but they don't know what you look like.
Yeah.
So you could like get away with murder.
By the way, I just Googled it. The top selling author is Shakespeare and the second one is Agatha Christie. And in terms of numbers, they're pretty neck and neck.
No, but I don't think Shakespeare is an author. He's a playwright. He didn't really write books, did he?
Jesus. He wrote plays.
He wrote plays.
Yeah.
So I don't think of him as an author in the same way that Agatha Christie is an author.
In that case, she's the most.
She is.
Estimated sales 2 billion. J.K. Rowling 600 million.
Well, that's nothing.
She's nowhere near Agatha Christie. Barbara Cartland's the next with only 500 million. Whereas Agatha Christie's on 2 billion. Agatha Christie's neck and neck with Shakespeare. I don't even see the Bible on this list.
She's bigger than the Bible. She is. For somebody who doesn't think of herself as an author.
Yeah.
And yet she's the world's best-selling author.
Yeah. A surfing author.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Thrift Shop Biography. We love making this podcast and we're absolutely thrilled that so many of you are already listening. You could really help us out by leaving us a review somewhere, wherever you listen to this podcast. And if you could share us, tell your friends about us, or drop some links on social media. We have a Facebook page called Thrift Shop Biography, so make sure you come over there to hear about the episodes first and what else we're up to. Okay, see you next week. And if you're new here, there are loads more episodes now to go and listen in the back catalogue, so make sure you go and enjoy them. Okay, thank you very much.